Hello. Since I have heard a very young voice, I think that is the point where we can start. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world today at that point. My name is Vera Scholz, and I'm your moderator for this event. And I work with GIZ, and I'm the director of the Division for Climate Change, Environment and Infrastructure. A very warm welcome to the final closing event on the EnDev. EnDev stands for Energizing Development, Result-Based Finance Facility, financed by UK Aid, and the title of our event is Accelerating Energy Access Markets with Result-Based Financing. And I think you all noticed that this here is a virtual meeting, a digital meeting. We had very much hoped that we could come to the UK this year, to the COP, to Glasgow, but due to all the circumstances we have all over the world, this was not feasible. So this is why we have this meeting in this format today. And we decided to have a kind of a TV format, and I'm very, very happy that I can welcome here two keynote speakers and that we'll have here a very, very distinguished expert panel. And I know there's lots of people in the audience and you are invited to listen, and you also have the possibility to put questions into the chat modality here, and two of my colleagues from GIZ, that is Sarah and Barbara, will try to answer your questions or link you with some events later on where we could tackle all your questions. Maybe I start with setting a scene a little bit today, and then I come and introduce the keynote speakers as well as our panelists. So today, around 789 million people have no access to electricity, while over 2.8 billion people have to cook with polluting, inefficient fuels such as firewood. These people, living mainly in Africa and in Southeast Asia in rural areas, cannot wait for a national grid to reach them. And in some remote areas, decentralized energy solutions constitute anyway the only economically feasible solution. The multi-donor partnership Energizing Development, which we call in short EnDev, aims at providing access to modern energy as a means to deliver social, economic, and environmental change. The partnership has reached in total 22.99 million people since its start in 2005, and around 5.8 million people with the UK Aid-financed Result-Based Financing Facility, in short RBFF. And at that point, I already would like to thank UK Aid that you have very early promoted this approach, RBF, for market development. This is pioneer work, and that already at that point, thank you so much that you have enabled so many people to look into this issue of result-based financing. Today we have come together to jointly celebrate and to look back and to look beyond 7 years of piloting results-based financing approaches. And I'm very, very pleased at that point to introduce our two keynote speakers, that is Sarah Metcalfe. I will introduce you in a minute more in detail. We also have another keynote speaker, that is Daniel Busche. I will also introduce him in a second. And I will already name our panelists, which will have their event a little bit later. That is Mr. Philip Mann, Esther Reiling, Isaac Akiva, Charlie Miller, and Radhika Taka. But I will introduce all these very distinguished panelists a little bit later. So Today, we are looking forward to jointly explore the question, is result-based financing the right tool to transform energy access markets and to deliver on achieving the objective of the Agenda 2030 and especially SDG number 7, which deals with energy, as we all know. Now it is time for our first keynote speaker, and I hope she's already around. That is Sarah Metcalfe. Are you around?
I am, Vera. I am here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We are very much delighted to have you with us today. And you are the Deputy Director of International Climate Change and Green Growth Department at the Climate and Environment Division at the British Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, and you have worked, as I know, among others, in Rwanda and Africa. So we are very much delighted to have you here. And as I said before, we would have liked so much to come to the UK this year, but we'll come running next year, that I promise.
Excellent.
Good. Acknowledging the crucial role UK Aid has played in bringing result-based financing from the drawing board to a today well-known concept, we are eager to hear from you, Sarah, looking back on RBF Facility and looking forward to a future RBF. Floor is yours. We'd like to listen to you now.
Thank you very much, Vera, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are in the world. And I'm really delighted to have been asked to speak at this closing event. That as UK Aid, we've been sort of funding the results-based financing facility since 2012, and that financing falls within my team's area of responsibility. And as you said, I am Deputy Director for International Climate Change and Green Growth at what is now called FCDO, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. As many of you will probably know, FCDO was formed at the beginning of September this year, following the merger of the UK Department for International Development and the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office. It's a real privilege to speak in an event like this. As you were saying, Vera, it's a critical moment to be able to take stock of what was achieved with this partnership and through this facility, to celebrate what has been achieved and to learn lessons. And I think it's something that we quite often don't do enough of in the development community and in the climate community. So I'm really delighted to be joining you all today for this. I was just going to reflect a little bit on the context, as Vera, you have begun to do, to offer some of our reflections on what we call the RBF facility, and then say a little bit more about the UK on climate, in particular looking forward to COP26 next year, and very much looking forward to welcoming you all to Glasgow for that event. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the whole of this closing event, but I know that Phil will be representing FCDO during the panel discussion. So, starting a little bit with the context in terms of energy and climate. As you will all know, I'm sure, that the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report estimates that 35% of direct global greenhouse gas emissions are from the energy supply sector, with further emissions from energy use in buildings, in transport, in industry. Given that other high emitting sectors such as transport and buildings will rely predominantly on electrification to decarbonise, it's critical that the shift towards low carbon electricity accelerates rapidly alongside zero carbon fuels in some applications. And again, as you've already touched on, Vera, at the same time, progress is not yet on track for reaching universal energy access by 2030, which we all collectively commit to under SDG 7. And this remains a really important priority for partner governments, particularly those with populations with low access to electricity. Again, Vera, as you touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth pausing on the numbers. The sort of current estimates are around 800 million people not having access to electricity at all, and a recent study estimating that a total of 3.5 billion people, or around 45% of the global population, live with unreliable power, So, for example, frequent or sustained blackouts, which themselves drive usage of expensive and polluting alternatives like diesel generators. Over 2.8 billion people still rely on polluting fuels or technologies for cooking, and that overall figure, rather than reducing, is still rising, as adoption of clean fuels is failing to keep pace with population growth. Again, as I'm sure you're all very familiar, but worth pausing on and reminding ourselves of, I think, all of that drives deforestation and causes 4 million premature deaths each year from illnesses attributable to household air pollution, which disproportionately affects women, children, and the elderly. A further 1 billion people face access risks to cold chains for food and medicine, including those without access to electricity or living in hotter climate urban areas where electricity services do not exist, are intermittent, or indeed are too expensive. So that context remains challenging and a really critical area for all of us to be collectively working on. So taking that context and turning to reflect in particular on the RBF facility, I think our overall sense is, while there have inevitably been a few bumps in the road, there is much to celebrate with the RBF facility and what it has achieved. The programme's delivered improved clean energy access to over 5.8 million people, which is quite an extraordinary achievement, and for the UK represents a really important contribution to the 3 million people that UK International Climate Finance has supported with access, improved access to clean energy. Viri mentioned my previous role before this one. Until the summer, I was head of DFID's office in Rwanda for 3 years. And in that role, I had the privilege of meeting and speaking to some of those people who have been supported through the RBF facility's work. It was people who were using solar lights, and I had incredibly moving conversations with them and with their children about the difference that that was making to their lives, and the impact that the solar lighting was having, and that has stayed with me. I tried without success this morning to find a couple of photos from that particular visit, but it was it was really impressive to see in action. And when we started on this project as DFID, RBF was an innovative approach in any energy access market, and this programme really was a pioneer. We've learned a great deal, and we're really pleased that EnDev is working to share this learning with the wider international community through learning products and evaluations, and in the past few months, those 4 well-attended and extremely informative webinars. As the UK, as well as aiming at delivery on the ground that I've just described, our original intention in supporting the programme was very much to generate lessons and evidence for everyone on the use of results-based approaches to growing clean energy access markets. And we've certainly learned a great deal about the market sectors and geographies where these approaches work best, about the need for an appropriate enabling environment for these interventions to have most impact, and also on how best to undertake the independent verification required with results-based approaches. During this time, the lessons from this pioneering RBF facility have been widely shared, and we've seen results-based financing for clean energy being adopted by others, including by the World Bank and some regional development banks. It's also really pleasing to see that EnDev is increasingly using results-based financing approaches within its core activities. So as well as producing the important results on the ground that I described a little earlier, I think we can collectively claim some credit for innovating and wider influence in the broader development sector. One, I suppose, reflection we wanted to offer was, and I think something that you will discuss during the course of this closing event is, while the facility has achieved those results, ground level results, given the scale of the need that we were both Vera and I in climate and in energy access terms, I do think there is still a need to think about how we take this all to the next level. more thinking and more action to achieve widespread transformation. And I suppose a series of questions to be thinking through is this about reaching a certain critical mass? Should we be looking to engage with results-based incentives, not at the level of individual technologies or at the national or subnational level, but at a national or indeed regional level to really transform markets? To think all this through and to do this, we would clearly need to engage closely with partner governments and have their full buy-in. And I think something that for all of us to be reflecting on. Before I conclude, I just wanted to touch on the kind of wider FCDO and UK context. So as I said, our contribution to the facility was funded through UK International Climate Finance, or ICF, and last year the UK Prime Minister announced that our ICF would be doubled to £11.6 billion in the 5 years from next April. And as part of that, clean energy will be a very important part of that commitment, alongside 3 other core pillars: nature for people, climate resilience, and sustainable cities, infrastructure and transport. So looking to the future, the UK is very much stepping up on our climate finance commitment. In the energy part of that, UK Aid will be supporting major RD&D efforts, as well as providing technical assistance to build the policy, the regulations and the general enabling environment which is needed for the transition to clean energy. I can hear someone speaking. I will continue in the hopes that yes, I think the mic has gone off again. And I should also mention in this regard, in terms of the broader UK effort on energy and climate, that our substantial support through the multilateral development banks and our development finance institution, CDC, will increasingly aim to support the energy transition as well. Internally, we're sort of working through what all of this means and thinking about our next phase of programming. For all of us, reflecting on that in the COVID-19 context is important. But on energy, we're thinking through what some of the pull mechanisms might be helpful in accelerating market adoption of climate technologies. And our experience and all of the lessons that we have learned through the RBF facility is really helpful to that thinking process. And we get the sense that we're not alone in thinking through the need for pull or results-based approaches. We're aware of a number of proposals and plans for results-based approaches within the multilaterals, within our bilateral partners, and recently amongst the philanthropies, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation. In working together, I think we should be aiming not at a range of different initiatives and programs which carry with them the risk of confusing markets and partners and might struggle to build economies of scale. Instead, I think where possible, we should all be thinking about coming together in our offer to achieve the biggest impact in terms of both development and climate. More broadly, in terms of the UK, I suppose a couple of things with which to conclude. One we've already alluded to, which is COP26. Next year is a very important year for the UK on the international stage, given both COP26 and also our leadership of the G7. And we have put tackling climate change and addressing its impact on people and communities and restoring nature at the real centre of our international outreach over the next year. On COP26, the Energy Transitions Campaign will form a core pillar of our approach. We also have the Climate Ambition Summit coming up on Saturday. In that context, you will have seen just last week the UK announcing an ambitious target for our own NDC, which will be discussed at the summit. So lots of energy and activity, lots more to come over the coming year on this agenda, which we're extremely excited about. But to conclude by saying thank you, I think we have very much valued being part of the EnDev partnership since 2012. I wanted to pass on our huge thanks to the EnDev team for your implementation of the RBF facility, and to colleagues in other development agencies for their collegiate approach to the partnership. As I've touched on, our kind of collective challenge going forward is to bring all of our knowledge and resources together to accelerate change. We know that in order to reach SDG 7, we need to accelerate progress and work in a more transformational fashion. It's also clear that the climate crisis demands that we all move faster. In all of that, I am absolutely sure that EnDev has a very important contribution to make. Many thanks to all of you, and I wish you an excellent meeting. I will stay for as long as I can, but yes, I wish you very fruitful discussions. Thanks very much. Back to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Sarah, also for these very encouraging words, and thank you that you also will continue to stay a bit, and then you'll have to go. I think what is very close to our heart at EnDev is as well, you know, this international cooperation and not doing things only by ourselves, but to collaborate with others. And I think this is as EnDev is a multi-donor undertaking. This is very close to our heart, and I think internationally it is also very much necessary. And you have given us the big picture about the rationale of why UK Aid started this approach. And thank you also very much to give us some kind of information on how, what kind of focus you will put in climate finance. And this is also very encouraging to hear that UK will continue to invest in climate finance, especially also in the energy sector, but also, as you said, in the nature-based solutions. And when we come to the issue of firewood, we are very close to nature. So thank you so much. And I think we are so much eager to continue our discussions next year in Glasgow, and to do what we couldn't do this year. So thank you so much. Now I would like to come to our second keynote speaker, that is Daniel Busche. Daniel, you are the Director of Energizing Development Program, and you have worked in several positions here within GIZ, also in the water sector, for example, in Jordan. And now looking back at 7 years of experiences in result-based financing approaches, what are your key takeaways? Daniel, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Vera, and a warm welcome on behalf of the whole EnDev family here, and dear fellow RBF enthusiasts and practitioners. And I can see on the list of attendees, there's some very early movers and shakers online. For instance, I could see Stephen Hunt being here, who joined the RBF from the very first day. And apparently also some very young attendees who know how to unmute their parents' mics on the laptops. So really good to have you all here. And of course, also a very warm welcome to the other panelists. Thank you, Sarah, for your keynote, and also for the personal note that you put, but also for providing that bigger picture. And I would really like to use this opportunity to thank you as UK Aid as the donor for the RBF facility. And I must say, we are really delighted to host this closing event today, and jointly, as you said, Sarah, also celebrate the closing of the EnDev implemented RBF facility with the exciting panel discussion ahead. And having said that, I will try to be brief to keep the time for the discussion. But allow me, as Vera also hinted, to take you back a bit to the beginning of the RBF facility in 2012 and 13, and a journey of 7 years of implementation and learning. And although we tend to say that RBF was a new approach at that time, it has actually already existed for quite a while. But I think what was new at that time, and again, looking at the movers and shakers of that period, was to apply RBF as a technical assistance instrument in the energy access sector, and using it as a key tool to push off-grid market development. That was definitely new. And we're proud that UK asked EnDev to implement RBF across its portfolio at that time. And I think the result also speaks for itself, looking at 17 projects in 14 countries, and again, 7 years of implementation. And for us, the key objective, understanding from what the donor wanted, was diversity and learning. Diversity in RBF designs, in technologies, in the geographic scope, but also in the target groups we were looking at. And all of this accompanied by a very strong learning agenda with an extensive set of webinars, publications, a real-time evaluation going in depth, and today's event. But let me also be frank. RBF was a challenging journey, and UK Aid's expectations were really high. And we stumbled, and actually also we fell a few times. We had to realize that markets don't exist in vacuum, and market development really takes time. And not all developments can be foreseen when you design an RBF project, which then is going to be implemented for a couple of years. You need really patience to reap the fruits of your efforts. And today I can proudly say, yeah, the RBF facility reached about 5.8 million people, slightly overachieving the original target. But there were times when we were not sure that we will reach this target, to be very frank. But apart from achieving these defined targets and being proud of it, we're also delighted to have contributed to bringing RBF to the next level in the energy sector. And I think EnDev implementers, ourselves at GIZ, but of course also partners such as SNV and Practical Action, HEVOS, CLASP, and others, now regard RBF as a key modality to deliver on SDG 7 and on reaching universal access to energy. I think today RBF is a well-established approach which has found its way into the toolkit of development cooperation in the energy access arena. While the RBF facility is coming to an end, sadly, EnDev together with its partners will remain to be an RBF energy access pioneer, continuing to develop innovative RBF designs. These, I would say, next generation RBF approaches are aiming at a higher granularity and targeting poor people living in remote areas and to leave no one behind, or in particular, the incentivizing results on impact level. I personally am convinced that RBF can play a crucial role in accelerating off-grid markets. And if combined in the smart mix of, so to speak, classic technical assistance and capacity building, RBF incentives and access to finance for companies and beneficiaries are the right answer. EnDev will continue to share lessons learned while seeking partners to further scale up. Let me conclude by saying that I'm really proud, really proud of the extended RBF EnDev family. We have come a long way. And I would really like to particularly thank the EnDev project teams on the ground for bringing together these ambitious donor priorities and targets, sector objectives of our partner countries, and the needs of the private sector, and last but not least, the needs of our beneficiaries. As I said, sadly but true, but the RBF facility is coming to an end, and the current cooperation with our dear colleagues at UK Aid also comes to an end. I must say it was a special cooperation in which, let's also be honest, you challenged us, in which you really pushed us, in which you made us move out of our comfort zones. Thank you for your trust. I believe the results of the RBF facility speak for themselves. But thank you also for your professionalism and for your personal commitment. It has been an honor and pleasure to be on this journey with you, and we're looking forward to the next opportunity to join forces. I hope you will all enjoy the discussion, and Vera, back to you.
Thank you, Daniel. And also, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it's very hard to let the UK go in a way from EnDev. And I also, what I observed, it was really, as you said, a very interesting journey. And thank you, Daniel, also to remind us that with such a pilot, it's not that everything goes well at the beginning, yeah, and yet that even you had times where you had the feeling we might fail in certain circumstances. And Sarah, I mean, working also GIZ and also for the German ministries, I mean, when you have the idea like result-based financing, you also have to fight it through your organization. And there may be also voices which tell you this is not working, this is leave it alone, yeah. But this is, it was very brave and courageous that you ventured into result-based financing and developed this pilot, and that you allowed EnDev to implement it for you. And but we could see and learn, as you said, Sarah, at the beginning, in which geography is it working, in which circumstances, what does it need, and when do we also have to say it doesn't make much sense. So thank you very much to our two keynote speakers, and Sarah and Daniel, thank you so much. And I don't know, Sarah, whether you can continue to stay a bit or you have to go now.
Unfortunately, I need to head off now. I'm very sorry, but I leave you with Philip as our very, very capable representative. But Thank you, and thank you, Daniel, for your very kind words as well. It was a pleasure to be part of this.
Thank you, Sarah, and goodbye, and see you sometimes in the UK. Good. Okay, then we can continue with our first panel discussion. And this panel discussion is about the donor perspective. And this is why I'm very happy to welcome Philip Mann. You are a senior energy advisor at the Climate and Environment Division at FCDO. And you have been working in a variety of roles focused on energy and in developing countries for more than 25 years. And you have been the focal point at FCDO for the RBF facility. Now, could you please shed a bit more light on the initial intention of this large-scale? It was really a large-scale pilot. Sometimes you think a pilot, I mean, usually they are very small in size and in volume, but this was, I mean, UK Aid invested a lot of money for this pilot. We also have to mention this year at that point. And yeah, and what are the results? How do you see this? So, floor is yours, Philip.
Thank you very much, Vera. And good afternoon, good morning, everybody. And Daniel, thank you for your words, which are much appreciated. So let me run through in I think the 5 minutes to say a few opening remarks about the RBF programme from the UK Aid perspective. And as has been said, this has been running since 2012. I think it's a very timely point to draw some of the lessons together and to celebrate the successes. Now, it's been a very rich tapestry of experience and learning. So in 5 minutes, I will try and run through why we engaged in RBF as an approach, what we achieved, what was learned, and some thoughts about what might come next. So Vera, to answer your question directly, there were really two top-level reasons why we engaged in this programme. Firstly, of course, was to directly contribute to SDG 7 and achieve results on the ground, and I'll say a little bit about that. But I think a second very important objective and core to this programme was to generate learning and to share this learning in support of the overall international effort towards SDG 7. So as has been said, this programme was essentially a large pilot. It was a very large pilot, so it's £40 million contribution from UK Aid. And it was the first large scale pilot of the use of RBF in energy access markets. So UK funding really supported the testing of different forms of RBF mechanism, stimulating mostly off-grid, low-carbon energy access markets. And the programme, as Daniel has said, was made up at its peak of 17 different projects, so it was very diverse across both geographies and sectors. So why did we engage in RBF? Well, the thinking was, and one of the premises of the programme was that the private sector is better at working out how to deliver at scale. So the RBF as a modality allows the private sector to decide how to deliver. It's not the donors that are deciding on that delivery, it's the private sector themselves, and they're very much seen as best to make those decisions. So the RBF as an approach seeks to address market failures by reducing market uncertainty in terms of market viability, thereby reducing risk and increasing returns for early movers and adopters. That's the theory. So supporting products and services to come onto the market in volume. And it was anticipated that that volume would then drive lower prices through increased market penetration and series of learning effects. So we know the barriers, the types of generic barriers that exist are around weak and uncertain demand, low current volumes for many firms delivering decentralized energy, inefficient production and distribution at the beginning, resulting in higher cost products, lack of sector experience on the part of suppliers, and also on the consumer side, low awareness in some cases. So the question that the programme sought to address is whether RBF can be used to bridge some of these barriers and thereby drive market transformation. So what did we achieve? Well, we've talked about the headline indicator, which is that the programme has helped deliver improved clean energy access to over 5.8 million people. There were other top-line indicators that we had on our list as very important, which were around jobs created, private sector finance leveraged, and the number of energy enterprises created. And I'm happy to say that in most of those cases, the indicators that were established at the beginning of the programme, and I checked this morning, have been exceeded. Not in all cases, but for most of the important indicators, I think the programme has achieved well. I think it's important, as well as the quantitative indicators, to note some of the issues which are maybe less immediate or apparent. So the RBF in many cases has helped to drive qualitative improvements in the sector. And I can think of examples in the case of biogas in East Africa, where the use of the RBF as a modality has helped to improve product quality on the market, which has helped with consumer confidence and further development. And in the case of many of the projects, the result has been improved after-sales service in many cases. Another maybe less apparent achievement is that in many cases, organisations, the private sector engaged in RBF projects, have found the data around the verification of the projects to be very helpful in their general understanding of market developments. So that's been, if you like, an unintended consequence. Moving on to the wider question of transforming markets. So we've had a final evaluation of the programme undertaken, and the final evaluation found that the RBF projects did indeed lead to positive market development. They accelerated quality controlled energy access in most cases. So from that point of view, the acceleration of the market was successful. Despite that, I think it's fair to say that at this stage, in terms of market transformation, many of the markets are not yet at the point of self-sufficiency, and there are some important learning points there, which I will come on to at the end. In terms of the wider, if you like, learning effects that we hoped would come from the programme, we have seen, as Sarah mentioned at the beginning, a number of international organisations and some of our bilateral partners establishing RBF as an approach, and we were very pleased to be able to support a programme which provided learning into the international community. So what did we learn? Well, firstly, we learned that RBF works as an approach. The RBF demonstrated the use of RBF in accelerating energy access markets. It helped the private sector overcome barriers in many cases. But there is a great deal of nuance depending on the country and the technology. So it was found that the barriers are very variable from geography to geography and from technology to technology. In some cases, the pure financial barrier to market entry, the RBF worked very well. In other cases, where there may be behavioural or social factors which come to the fore, and I'm thinking in particular of clean cooking, for example, RBF really needs to work alongside other activities as part of a broader market development activity. I think there are specific cases with very capital intensive technologies, and I'm thinking here of solar mini-grids, for example, where the use of RBF needs to be designed very carefully and also needs to be working alongside the finance sector to ensure that cash flow problems and issues can be addressed. We found that implementers need to have very strong market awareness and willingness and ability to adapt as things change around the programme, which they inevitably do. And there are several projects where the policy environment shifted substantially and where we needed to make quite significant adjustments to programmes. So RBF can be used for broad-based market acceleration, but it can also be used, and this was demonstrated in several of the projects, and for targeting those most in need. And I think that's quite an interesting angle, this precise targeting, which can be achieved. In terms of where RBF works best, well, I think I'd like to call it a Goldilocks zone, where the stage of market development is not too early and not too well developed. In the latter case, there's the risk of wasting money. In the early market stage, we might need slightly different instruments. It's absolutely essential to have a supportive enabling environment alongside the use of RBF incentives. If not, if the policy and regulation is working against the RBF, then it's clearly going to be an uphill struggle. I think it's fair to say that the RBF has benefited from being embedded in the EnDev provision of TA at certain points and for certain projects. So a key lesson is that RBF needs to be part of wider market development activities, including the provision of technical assistance. I think we learned some hard lessons about engaging financial institutions, and there were some successes, but overall some resistance. And there are some lessons that we could learn from that. It may be that the individual projects were too small to attract the financial institutions in this case, or it may be that in some cases they were generally cautious and conservative. So from a more donor type perspective, I think we are happy that we've demonstrated the use of results-based financing, and it can deliver and demonstrate value for money, which is a very important thing from our perspective. We kept the RBF facility pretty lean, and we pushed for the majority of budget to be spent on incentives. And let's be frank, this created some pressures within the system, but I think the overall result was positive. I have to say, from our point of view in UK Aid, this was quite a heavy lift from a management perspective, and that's perhaps because we designed such a broad range of projects in different geographies and different sectors. I think perhaps with hindsight, we might have thought about designing a smaller number of larger projects, but that's with hindsight. So we learned that the RBF does indeed shift delivery risk from the donor to the private sector, and that's all fine. But we need to be mindful of how best to use RBF in different settings and sectors, because clearly you tend to get what you measure. And related to this, I think, is an issue of interest, is which entities can best benefit and grow from the use of RBF? Will most of the benefits accrue to large, well-capitalized organizations, or is there a need to specifically support smaller and local companies? And this really comes back to having a very clear theory of change from the start. And the final thought from a donor perspective, and this is only of interest to donors, is that it's important to recognize that using RBF, the spend profile tends to be backloaded, which is fine as long as it's recognized from the start. But I have to say it led to some jangling nerves at the beginning of the program. So Sarah Metcalfe mentioned at the beginning, I think really the most important prize for us is to take the lessons that we've learned from the RBF facility towards a really substantial scale up and indeed transformation. So we've learned a lot from this program, and I'd like just to say a few words, if I may, to conclude on the future and a few principles that I think might guide us. Firstly, I think we have to think about interventions which are commensurate with the scale of the challenge of really transforming markets, and work with our partners from the start to ensure that policies, regulations are working alongside and together with and complementing RBF incentives. And this is really about joining up interests and instruments for the best impact. And I tend to think we can learn probably more than we have from systems thinking approaches in how RBF fits in the overall system of activities. There's really a need to have a very clear theory of change from the start on the market shifting side of the use of RBF, but also from the perspective of reaching the poorest, and we need to be clear-sighted about that. We should start activities with a clear idea of what an exit strategy looks like and signal that to the market, albeit recognizing that adjustments will need to be made along the way to reflect changes in the real world. I wonder if we can be more creative about what we're incentivizing. So we know RBF incentives can boost the supply, distribution and demand side, but are there opportunities that we haven't looked at so far to use RBF type approaches to pull through private investments, for example, into local manufacturing capacity, which will add more value locally and could potentially, I think, be a real game changer. So something to think about. As Sarah mentioned, I would very much favour looking at coordinated international support and bringing together efforts where possible to provide clear messages to both partners and to markets. From the UK side, we're providing substantial input into the energy sector through international climate finance, and we are actively thinking through what sorts of pull mechanisms might be helpful in accelerating market adoption of, for example, clean energy technologies. And our experience of the RBF facility is going to be really helpful in that approach. So just to finish, we've learned a great deal from this programme. Thanks again to our partners at EnDev and all of the partners on the ground. I look forward to a lively discussion. Over to you, Vera. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. And I mean, indeed, I mean, what we can see that there is really a whole landscape of learnings and findings and designing now new RBF facilities or approaches. We have a much better understanding what works, what doesn't work. You know, also the policies which are maybe required to kind of embed our approaches here. And I think it's also very interesting to learn that with this pilot, this really huge pilot, not only that you intended to achieve results on the ground, because that is important if you want to achieve the SDG number 7, but at the same time have all these learnings. So thank you very much. And I think what is also important to hear, I mean, especially now that we also think about green recovery, that in the sector we can create jobs. I think this is very important to know that was one of the results. But I don't want to repeat what you just said and hand over to Esther Reiling. You are also a senior policy advisor at the Directorate General for International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. So we are talking here about this. And Esther, nice to have you here with us. You have been working for many years at the interface of environment and developments since the beginning of your career, and at DGIS you are working on programs creating access to renewable energy. With the SDG 7 RBF facility, the Dutch government has established a RBF facility in the energy sector now. Could you share some background on the rationale of choosing the RBF approach? So we are looking now in the future, because maybe also against the background of the experience we made by the UK aid-funded EnDev kind of RBF facility, you have picked up this idea and now you have started to set up this this facility. So why did you do so, and what is the background? Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vera, and allow me to first of all thank you very much for inviting me to this panel today. This was truly an invitation I could not decline, given that the RBF facility within EnDev has indeed been instrumental for the RBF facility on energy access SDG 7 results. But let me take a step back first and explain how we came to decide to use the RBF approach. Central to this decision, the fact that the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement are the backbone of our efforts in the area of development cooperation. And directly linked to this is the national policy goal that our government formulated back in 2015. And that is to support 50 million people in developing countries with access to renewable energy between the year 2015 and 2030. And that's, of course, a policy objective that directly contributes to SDG 7, but is also relevant from a climate perspective. Now, we do recognize that public support alone will not allow us to achieve SDG 7, that we also need private sector involvement. So our focus in our efforts is very much on leveraging the private sector, including through resource-based financing. And there are several reasons why we choose to work also with the RBF approach. And let me highlight a few today. First and foremost is the conviction that universal energy access should be truly universal and that no one should be left behind. Well, given the tremendous economic potential that energy provides, it's clear that investing in energy access makes perfect common sense. However, we all know that in real life, many hurdles remain in the shape and form of both real and perceived risks. Well, the good news is that emerging business models have started to address consumer affordability issues. However, poor people in remote areas, in smaller cities and towns, in slums, in refugee situations, they still remain hugely unserved and underserved. And this is also understandable. Many private actors are hesitant, of course, to expand their businesses to poorer regions due to the related uncertainties, risks, and costs. Resource-based financing allows to provide this certain incentive to private sector players to expand their business activities to poorer customers, to poorer regions, by cushioning the associated risks and by lowering the associated costs. And so what we hope that the Dutch RBF facility SDG 7 results will do is to tempt private sector players to expand just outside their comfort zone and reach and through that reach new target groups and new geographies. But at the same time, we also hope that RBF enables local entrepreneurs that are already active in the target areas to reach out, to grow their businesses faster and to reach out to more customers in a shorter period of time. So in fact, what we hope RBF can do is to accelerate, well, the word has been used or has been used more often already, to accelerate the development of energy access markets. The second reason for us for choosing the RBF approach is that it fits well with the ministry's ambition to continuously improve the effectiveness of our development cooperation efforts, including our cooperation with the private sector. And Phil also mentioned this, but we hope that the flexibility that the RBF approach gives to private sector partners will turn out to be a good way of mobilizing the private sector, allowing them to decide how to best deliver on energy access. And finally, SDG 7 results offers us a learning opportunity, as it will allow us to learn firsthand from the experiences with resource-based financing. Now, Vera, you also asked about the influence of the UK-based, UK-funded RBF facility on SDG 7 results. Well, that influence is clearly present. As a member of the EnDev family, we obviously followed the progress of the RBF facility within EnDev with great interest. And we got convinced that resource-based financing could deliver an important contribution also to the achievement of our energy access goal. So yes, the RBF experiences with EnDev certainly influenced the decision to start working with RBF ourselves. It has, however, also shaped the design of SDG 7 results. And that's hardly surprising, as RBO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and together with GIZ, coordinator of EnDev partnership, they developed the proposal for SDG 7 results, and they are now also implementing it. And RBO has indeed taken the lessons from RBF, in particular from the RBF facility within EnDev, into account when they designed the SDG 7 results. Some examples. For SDG 7 results, we set one and one only primary target, and that is to achieve access for at least 2 million people in households. And of course, we also consider the development of markets a highly desired outcome, as well as the mobilization of private finance, the creation of jobs, the reduction of CO2-related emissions. But we did not set any performance targets for these other indicators to prevent the risk or to avoid the risk of contradicting performance contracts. Another example is that providing only a financial incentive be insufficient the market forward. And that is why we wanted to be ready to provide technical assistance if necessary. And for smaller companies working in the target segments, TA was already available also in the application process. And that actually improved also the success rate of these applications. And of course, not all implementers will move at the same speed. So some will move very quickly, others will be delayed or stalled, either temporarily or permanently. And we wanted to prevent a lock-in of funds. And therefore, it will be possible for SDG 7 results to reduce the maximum subsidy amount for those who are underperforming or not performing, and find a way to make these funds available for those who overperform. You have to note, though, that we're still in early stages of implementation, so we haven't seen this in practice yet, but that's the plan, that's the idea. So in short, the RBF facility within EnDev has clearly been a great influence on SDG 7 results, and Sarah was very right earlier to take some of the credit for this. As I mentioned, it's still early days for us. The first tender round resulted in the selection of 12 projects in 9 countries. 7 of these projects are on clean cooking, 5 are on electricity, and that's all off-grid solar in this case. And that was earlier this year. And since then, companies have started moving forwards. And well, despite, you hinted at that already yourself, despite the additional challenges that the year 2020 confronted them with, many of the projects are indeed already making good progress, but we have not yet passed the milestone of the first completed verification. So it's still early days for us. We look at RBF as a valuable complement to the ministry's portfolio of activities on energy access in developing countries, but not as the silver bullet. We do recognize that to truly leave no one behind, a gentle push of the market will not always be sufficient, will not do, and will need to be complemented by other interventions. So let's call them the regular activities under the EnDev partnership will remain crucial. We will also continue to support governments through other means, mainly through multilateral institutions and multilateral development banks. But we also provide, for example, risk-bearing capital through the Access to Energy Fund, which is a fund managed by the Dutch Development Bank, FMO. So for us, RBF is really part of the package and a hopefully very useful one indeed. So thank you.
Thank you, Esther. And it's very nice to hear that you were able also to draw on the experiences from the EnDev RBF facility in designing your new facility, and that it continues. I mean, it's very good to hear that you picked up this idea, and as you said, it is not a silver bullet. You also have other interventions to work on universal energy access, but it's very, very nice to hear that you will continue with this idea and this approach. I'm a little watching the time, and we are already at 3 o'clock, and then I would suggest that I will ask our other speakers now to make their interventions, and that we hopefully come for a bit of a discussion at the end. So I would like to now come to the partner government perspective, and I'm very happy to welcome Engineer Kiva. You are Secretary for Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy of the Kenyan government, and you look back on more than 20 years in energy and senior government positions. Very, very happy that you are here with us, because I used to work in Kenya for 5 years, in Nairobi, but also in Turkana in the northern part. I worked for 2.5 years in Lodwar at Lake Turkana, where I understand there are some windmills which are going to be constructed there. It was very nice for me to hear a couple of years ago. It is we had a final evaluation of the RBF facility, and one key finding is that in most cases the RBF projects ensured market acceleration and in product sale volumes. Kenya had the largest RBF project portfolio in the facility, featuring a diverse range of technologies from improved cook stoves to pico PVs, mini grids, biogas, off-grids solutions, and so on. Have you observed that certain market dynamics in these sectors have changed since RBF projects were introduced in Kenya in 2014? Floor is yours. And there's two speakers behind you from the private sector, and it's already 3 o'clock. So welcome.
Thank you, Vera, and Jambo. In the interest of time and noting our partnership with the private sector, I'll be leaving a quite good time for our private sector colleagues to also give their perspectives. But just to say good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. We very much appreciate the RBF facility, and since it has begun, as we have correctly said, we have had various projects being supported in Kenya. What we have been able to observe is that there has been an expansion to new markets. The companies, the private sector companies which were supported, were able to move from their comfort zones, from their areas where it made a lot of economic sense, ease of operation, and they were able to expand even to underserved areas. And this was made possible because of the facilitation through the RBF facility. We have also been able to see increased variety of good quality products and solutions. And this is ranging from pico PV, from cook stoves to biogas solutions, quite a variety of solutions coming in, and very good quality. Indeed, we notice that RBF allows firms to innovate, and this is leading to increase in efficiencies, both in technology and also delivery models. We have also been able to see enhancement of affordability of solutions to aid customers. For example, in the pico PV RBF, it was supporting private companies to promote flexible payment solutions to enhance affordability of high quality solar solutions. So this financing, which when it comes to the solar farms, it is then extended to consumers, enables consumers to be able to have the products because they are affordable and not only lower tier, but indeed higher tier. So we have been able to see a transition to higher tier solutions, especially with our cook stoves and biogas RBF. And this is good because then households and individuals and SMEs can be able to have energy solutions which are going to meet their needs in a better way if they are able to migrate to high tier. And then the other one is a mitigation of market entry barriers. This RBF has been very good in that. For instance, in mini grid RBF, the private sector developers were motivated to invest, set up and operate mini grids in underserved regions of Kenya. This has made it possible for us to be able to achieve our goal of universal electrification, universal access to modern energy, which we hope to then realize by the year 2030. Other than that, there have also been a lot of peer learning, benchmarking, technology transfer, because some of these projects we are doing were also being done in other countries. Therefore, it was possible to see what other countries are doing and be able to benchmark with them and be able to learn what they are doing and be able to see what we could be able to adopt in our country and make better delivery models, make better technology and all that. So in a nutshell, Vera, RBF for us as a government has been very useful, meeting the energy needs of our citizens. It has been a tool which is addressing a challenge of affordability, a tool which is meeting the challenge of enhancing the technology, of bringing in innovation. And when our history is written a few years later, when we'll have achieved our goal, I'm sure we'll have a chapter on the contribution by RBF. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Isaac. And I think it's very interesting to hear about the affordability, because I mean we are talking about rural areas where many people live who do not have so much money to afford approved cook stoves or mini grids and so on. So I think that is very interesting that there are solutions which are also affordable, and that through the program, you were also able to network with other countries to learn from their experiences. So thank you very much. And it would be very, very nice to be in Kenya today and after the event to sit somewhere and have some nyama choma and some chapatis and all these things.
Karibu.
But the
Karibu.
times are currently so that we cannot travel so much. So I would love to come to Kenya one day. Maybe it's possible even next year or in 2003. I don't know when it's possible to travel again. Now, I suggest that we continue with the private sector and have the discussion at the end. So I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Charlie Miller. You are Senior Advisor at the Global Distributors Collective, supporting and representing about 200 last-mile distribution companies working in more than 50 countries around the globe. Welcome, Charlie, and what is your view on result-based financing and its potential to transform energy markets? Which aspects of RBF approaches are crucial from a distribution perspective? So I would love to hear from you. Charlie, are you around?
Yes, thank you very much, Vera. I think before I jump in, I just wanted to expand a little bit on what the Global Distributors Collective is. As you said, we have 200 members. About 75% of them are in Africa, with the rest in Asia and Latin America. More than half sell more than one product category, so lighting, cooking solutions, but also water and health and sanitation products. And the average turnover is around 100K per year. So whilst we have some last mile distributors that are into the $1 million per year in revenue, we really are talking about a very large number of small companies. That said, they have had a tremendous impact. Our members estimate that they've reached 170,000 people on average. So adding that up, you get a figure somewhere in the region of 30 million people reached in total. And in terms of the estimated customer income, about 3/4 of them are estimated to earn less than $3.20 a day, which is the poverty line. So a strong pro-poor focus, established operations in remote rural areas. And I would characterize our membership as often working on the fringes of established markets, introducing products into new areas, creating awareness, trust and demand for the first time, and really meeting some of those other objectives that Philip picked up on around the need for awareness with some product categories. We at the GDC feel that it's critical that smaller companies be included in results-based financing. There's a risk of market distortion whenever you're choosing a subset of the private sector to support. And we feel passionately that an efficient and competitive market requires a reasonably level playing field, where you can have both vertically integrated and unbundled business models allowed to compete with each other to see what can deliver the best products, the best prices, the best after-sales services, and what can really drive scale. And I think, our view about the important role of distributors is backed up by some of the trends that we've seen in the off-grid solar sector in particular, where we've seen specialization and unbundling. We've seen smaller companies that have deep local market knowledge and strong networks that are often better placed to create demand and achieve sales and efficiently distribute in the area that they serve, in the very specialized geographical area that they serve. And those companies are increasingly being supported by specialist service providers in areas such as software, logistics, and human resources. And of course, by working through those unbundled value chains, we are also boosting the sales of leading manufacturers, but also distributors are increasingly partnering with white label manufacturers based in China that are producing very cost competitive new generation products, helping to drive down prices for the sector as a whole. We also think it's important because arguably smaller companies have a more positive impact in terms of local job creation, and the recycling of revenues and investments into the company in the local economy. And of course, it's important for many governments to support national private sector players. Until now, I would say that last mile distributors have got a mixed track record of being able to access results-based financing facilities. Obviously, there's always a trade-off. If you're going to support a larger number of smaller companies, if you're going to build that kind of portfolio, then that comes with higher risks and higher transaction costs for the fund manager. I think one of the key reasons why distributors struggled a bit is because access to finance is one of the key challenges that they face, and is so often having working capital in place is a key criteria for inclusion in a results-based financing facility. Secondly, these smaller companies have more limited capacity, so I think that speaks to the need that others have picked up on about the need for technical assistance to help to reduce the risk of providing financial support to these companies. And then finally, just a note on the application processes. I think last mile distributors can often struggle to write the lengthy application forms or build the detailed financial models that funders can expect to see. And we would encourage a more sort of early stage equity-like approach that looks more at the capabilities and track records of the individuals involved in the management team, and looks more at doing due diligence with these companies, as well as that more formal kind of Word and Excel based application process. So to conclude, I think there are four things that we would strongly encourage. The first is ongoing, is supporting the efforts that we've already heard about and encouraging results-based financing providers to do more to try and build diversified and inclusive portfolios that limit market distortion by working with more companies and smaller companies, and supporting that competition between vertically integrated and unbundled supply chains and business models. So for example, this could be, when you're looking at all the applications that you receive, you just take it into consideration at portfolio level and try and get a nice mix of smaller and larger companies. Or it could be through a more formal mechanism, such as a separate window for national businesses, applying for a differentiated package of support. I think we would like to see results-based financing. I think we've heard repeatedly this idea that it's sort of a tool in a toolbox, that it's very important, but it's not a one-size-fits-all or a panacea. We would encourage RBF to be included in packages of support that also include things like working capital and technical assistance, and that explicitly acknowledge the importance of things like awareness campaigns when seeking to introduce new products into an area for the first time. I think we really encourage what we're seeing at the moment around the scope of some results-based financing programs getting broader, moving away from just focusing on lighting to also including cooking. And just thinking about the products that our members serve, we think there could be potential in integrating other beneficial products, for example, in the water, sanitation, agriculture, or health sectors. And that way you could provide a package of support that enables distributors of beneficial products to make those products available and to contribute to a range of SDGs along the way. And then finally, I wanted to just strongly applaud the recent efforts that have been made to improve targeting mechanisms for results-based financing. Some of these, for example, have been linked to remoteness and to income and to gender. So I'm aware that EnDev has a last mile results-based financing pilot in Uganda, where the financing amount is linked to the distance from the nearest transport hub, and that kind of speaks directly to the remoteness challenge and the high cost of distribution in rural areas. And then I just saw the other day that Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund in Kenya has introduced a pro-poor supplement to the results-based financing amount based on the Poverty Probability Index. And that, again, it seems like a really interesting approach to try and reach lower income customers. And then finally, just on gender, I think we've also seen some nice examples, for example, the World Bank in Yemen providing additional results-based financing incentives for companies that are able to reach female-headed households. So in short, encouraging us all to build diversified and inclusive portfolios and to continue to innovate around targeting mechanisms that enable us to use RBF to reach more people in more challenging areas.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for your statements and your comments, because I think the experience and observations you have made, that is again very important for future RBF facilities to be designed. Yeah, so you have also so many experiences and insights, and I think it's a lot of food for thought how we can even more improve on this kind of approach, and also to transfer from SDG number 7 to other sectors, as you said, yeah, be it the water sector, health sector, which is so important during COVID-19 times. So thank you very much. And I would now quickly jump to Radhika Taka for her intervention. You are the Vice President Corporate Affairs of Greenlight Planet, and Greenlight Planet is a private sector company specialized in off-grid solar home energy systems, and you serve as a president of the board of directors of GOGLA, which is the Global Off-Grid Industry Association. So it's also very nice to have you here. And my question to you would be, what is your view as a vice president of Greenlight Planet on result-based financing? What can you share on hand experience from a company that participated in the result-based finance facility in the framework of EnDev? So Radhika, floor is yours.
Sure, thank you so much. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to get really, directly to some of our reflections and learnings from the program. And just to share, we've been involved in a number of the RBF programs over the last 7 years, either directly as Greenlight Planet or by supporting some of our distribution partners. So we've had a number of experiences, and maybe the short of it is that we are huge advocates for the RBF approach. Admittedly, I was very skeptical at the beginning. It sounded extremely complex. How do you verify an individual customer sale in like the Lake region of Tanzania, already not a well-established market because it's so hard to reach? So I had reservations, but very quickly overturned, I think, as we saw how well managed these programs are. And of course, over the many different iterations, the management of the details of verification, the thoughtfulness of the programs have matured tremendously. So I'll share a few things from our perspective in all the programs we've been involved in that we think are incredible and just really make this approach very effective. And then I'll share a few suggestions for designs of, ideally future RBFs that we would love to see more of. So things that we think work extremely well. I think to begin with, the premise of this is that the results-based financing approach recognizes and helps to compensate for the risks that private sector companies will face by going to really unknown areas. So either extremely remote, high risk for security reasons, underdeveloped markets where there's a huge cost of creating consumer awareness, or just a lack of information of customers, or just sort of other kinds of businesses as normal. And so this program really recognizes that and helps to offset, a lot of that risk of unknown, that companies, particularly in a nascent industry, don't have the luxury of playing with their own money with, right? We either have to raise investor capital to expand to risky unknown areas. If that doesn't work out, we've got to pay our investors back. So there are reasons that companies are naturally going to stick to areas that are more comfortable. And this recognizes that and really helps to create a pull for companies. I think with that, this program allows for a lot of adaptability. So unlike a grant program where a company might design a full-fledged program and then get sort of a lump sum of money, to support that business plan or that proposed idea. When that happens, often as you start to get out to that region or you start to build your distribution in this unknown area, you have to change, right? You learn things from the market, realize your initial blueprint doesn't work, and you have to change to make it work. And in many cases, when you've applied for a lump sum of money, you've got to go back and get approval from the funder. There's a lot of back and forth and a lot of restriction, understandably so. What we love about this program is it's so business centric. We decide how to make it work. And if it doesn't work, we just don't do it, right? I mean, that's obviously a little bit of the risk. But we often have gone out with one idea, and then we realize, by going out to these newer markets, consumer awareness or education is not quite where we thought it was. We need to change the approach. We're going to put a little bit more emphasis on marketing, or we change the products we promote initially to create awareness. And this really allows for that adaptability. We can quickly scale up or down, different components of our plan. One of the other things that we have really appreciated with some of these RBF programs, again, there's been a lot of different ones in different geographies, is access to data, again, about less known and less developed markets. This was something that particularly has come up in the COSAP program, one of the ones that Engineer Kiva played an instrumental role in developing. In these 14 underserved counties in Kenya, we're going to areas that we have very limited market experience in, Lodwar in particular, Kakuma, just not areas where well-established, consumer products markets exist. So we were able to access very different kind of information on mobile transactions, a lot of demographics of the populations in these areas that we wouldn't have had access to otherwise, just through traditional kind of market insights and market information. And that's really helped our entry into these, significantly more challenging markets. It's still early for us. It's just this calendar year, but that's really softened, these bigger leaps into unknown areas for us. And I think that's, one of the most interesting things here, that the incentive, the funding in this program is truly linked to outcomes. And that serves all the stakeholders' needs, right? If I assume, put myself in a government's perspectives, their goal is to work as quickly towards universal energy access as possible. Companies are not going to go where it's just, immediately possible, and this helps to lure companies. Customers who have been traditionally underserved now have access to energy solutions that they weren't, exposed to before, or they didn't have access to before. I think donor funding potentially used in a much more efficient way, in that the funding is not dispersed if the result is not achieved, right? And so I think that seems overall in the bigger picture like a much more efficient use of public funding. And then from a company perspective, it really helps us ensure that subsidy programs and donor funding comes into the marketplace without distorting commercial marketplaces, right? It's not like we're placing bets on one company. It really invites the development of a competitive marketplace. It allows us to determine our own, our recipes, our solutions, and for us to decide whether we participate or not based on what makes sense for our businesses. So, overall, we're huge advocates. I think a few messages, if I can quickly summarize, that we would suggest keeping in mind for the development of future programs. One, the less prescriptive the requirements, the better. Create space, allow space for that agility, for that adaptability. We recognize the need to be, to make sure that these efforts will be sustainable. So, short lists of things that the funding cannot be used for, absolutely fine, but keep that agility in mind. To product selection, I think be really thoughtful, I think, about what the right product is. So, sometimes we see a bias towards larger systems, larger multi-light systems, as like the bare minimum for the beneficiaries of these programs. And while sort of larger systems may be, more ideal eventually, the reality is that the less developed a market is, the less ready a consumer is to jump to, a large system. And we see this in areas where there's almost no awareness of technology. There's a reluctance to go directly to a $150 solution, even if there's a pay-go, some sort of financial payment plan, right? People are more willing to start with a lamp. And there are really robust lamps that provide for mobile phone charging, radio, bright light, portability. And ultimately, we see over time, through millions of sales, we see that people do graduate to larger systems. So a little bit more thought into what is that specific market ready for. That might be very different than, a similar sort of seemingly similar demographic just on the other side of one country or one region. I think that's really important. And we think that there can be a balance. So, productive use technology, there's tremendous interest in, RBF facilities to accelerate productive use, the adoption of productive use technologies. Let's just not lose sight of the fact that there's still need for portable lights and really sort of ultra affordable. So keep all of that in mind. One of the other things is data collection. It can be very cumbersome. So our recommendation here is toe the balance. We need to verify that these sales have happened. Otherwise, the integrity of this program is gone, right? But what we found is that sort of in the interest to collect more impact data, our customers will sometimes just reject or just hang up the phone or give a very short answer because these phone calls come while they are working their job. They're in the fields, they're farming, they are, at sort of an hourly job or something like that, and they don't have the time to answer 20 questions. And when they see that phone number come up again, they just ignore it. And that's problematic because that's tied to the verification. And so it's counted as an invalid sale. And so, we have a lot of data as companies. We can provide the mobile transaction, data. Try to think about the simplest way to verify the sale and then lean on the company to do some of the more impact research. We can put our heads together to figure out the other impact data that we want to collect, but really think about the sort of time of the customers. And one last point on that is we found that sometimes the questions that are asked can be a little bit invasive. Things like how many people are in your household? How many children do you have? Culturally, sometimes people are a little bit reluctant to share for superstitious reasons, or if they have multiple partners and multiple families, they may be a little bit confused or reluctant to share. So sometimes in some geographies, it might need to be a little bit more sort of culturally sensitive to the questions asked. I'll stop there. I have so much more to share. But yeah, thank you all for this platform, and we'd love to see more of this.
Radhika, thank you so much. I had to laugh at the end because when you talked about data collection, I can really imagine how difficult it is. Sometimes you think, but it's so difficult to collect some data. It is not easy. Yeah. So this is also a very good kind of idea how to organize data collection, and what you also said, how important it is to especially in remote areas, how to develop the market, how can it graduate, with what do you start? I mean, these are very important lessons learned again. I mean, we have seen, how to say now as a moderator, the original idea to have two panels and to have a nice, lively discussion doesn't work out because everybody had to share so many experiences and insights and so on. So my suggestion would be, because we couldn't go to Glasgow this year, we will all meet in Glasgow. So I hope, Phil, that is possible, that we have another exchange on RBF when we come to join COP26, and that we have another kind of side event on this subject, because as Philip and also Esther, Kiva, Radhika, and also Charlie, there are so many things to share and to mind. And what we have seen is that RBF has become an acknowledged applied instrument, and it is continuing. We have seen that in the Netherlands, Esther, you have picked up this idea. There are development banks picking up and continuing, and I'm very sure also in the UK you will continue to use this instrument. So I think it would be nice to continue this discussion, latest maybe if somehow possible in Glasgow next year, where we can also include the audience in asking questions and so on. So I would like to thank, first of all, before I hand over to you, Philip, for the final words, I would like also to thank Barbara Richard and her team within EnDev, who have not only prepared this event today, but also who have worked on the RBF facility. Thank you very much. It's now coming to an end, but you see it has a future. And more people are venturing into this most interesting instrument. So last word, and I say goodbye for today. And Philip, your last final word. Thank you.
That's very kind, Vera. And I think your suggestion is an excellent one. There's clearly so much we all have to say and so much experience to share. I'd firstly like to say thank you very much to the panel. All of your suggestions are very well noted. There's clearly a lot further we could go with this discussion. Let's meet again in Glasgow. Thank you very much to you, Vera, for chairing. Thank you to the excellent EnDev team in headquarters and the implementing organisations in all of the countries. And thank you to all the participants in this meeting. I know we're now out of time, But those are my final remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and see you in Glasgow soon, and goodbye to Kenya and wherever you are, and have a nice breakfast now, or a nice lunch, or a nice dinner. So see you next time. Bye bye.